Hi everyone, I am Jaffery and I welcome you to another episode of this book review segment that was started recently. Today we'll talk about a very widely read and a controversial book, I must say. It was authored by Ambassador John Bolton, who was USA's National Security Advisor during the presidency of Donald Trump, which lasted from 2017 to 2021. And he was one of the very many advisors who was fired by Trump during his tenure. This is the book. It is titled The Room Where It All Happened, a White House Memoir. Uh, this book is interesting and important, I must say, to read for a number of reasons. But chief among them is the fact that John Bolton was a practitioner who saw it all and did it all along with President Trump in the foreign policy and national security domain. So he's in a better position to tell us as to what President Trump did in managing America's foreign policy and security issues and challenges. But when you read a book of a practitioner, you first need to understand where that person is coming from. Ambassador Bolton has, throughout his career, taken a liking to hawkishness. He has advocated for US dominance in global politics, and he has also said that US preponderance should be used as a force multiplier, and he has not shied away from advising governments in the past, including the government that he served recently, to use force to coerce other countries and to eke out strategic and tactical benefits. Um, but in reading books like this, it is important for us to be cautious in taking things on face value. Look, he was one of the advisors who were fired by President Trump. So his distaste for the president is well known to everyone. So as readers and as people who want to use this book for their own works, it is important that we do not take everything that is written in this book as gospel truth, because a lot of things would be exaggerated, a lot of things would be written out of malice and out of a desire to exact revenge. So one has to be very careful in plucking out things that could be useful, and sifting through things that might not be useful or might not be authentic. Uh, as I mentioned just a while back, that Ambassador Bolton was not a dove. So his approach towards US foreign policy and security issues was a very tough one. And he bickered with the president over how to deal with countries like Iran and North Korea. And I've picked up these two countries out of the many he talks about in his book because um, being aggressive with these two countries is rife with risks. And throughout this book, he has shown that he was very much against Trump's resort to diplomacy with North Korea. He was also very much against what he called a cowardly approach towards Iran. Uh, this is because he has always been a hard critic of the Iranian political system, its regime's socio-political setup, the IRGC, and the dominance of the Shia clergy in that country. And throughout the book, in his chapters on Iran, he has lambasted President Trump for being soft on that country, despite the fact that President Trump had a maximum pressure campaign on Iran, and he also left the deal, uh, the JCPOA, unilaterally. But Bolton suggested that Trump's regard for innocent casual lives was not what America should have done. Throughout this book, he says that President Trump should have taken kinetic actions against Iran and against the very many tentacles of the regime in the Middle East. Now, for a national security advisor as experienced as Bolton to say uh, that targeting Iran militarily is something that would leave the US in a better position is rather bizarre because great US foreign policy thinkers and practitioners have told the Americans time and again that Iran is a tough nut to crack. Henry Kissinger in one of his books said that Iran is the country that vociferously safeguards its national interests. So if the US were to launch kinetic operations against Iran, the consequences would be horrendous. And we all know that the Middle East, which is already on fire, would be destabilized, something that the region and other regions and the US can not afford. Um, but we also need to understand that Bolton is not the only one. Bolton is part of a group of people who have come into the US system over the years and have pushed governments to take reckless actions. Recently, former Secretary of State Donald Rumsfeld died, and he was the one who was the lead actor in cajoling the US to go into Iraq in 2003. We all know what happened and is happening as a result of that. And he was one of the few people who scuttled the U- Afghan Taliban, Afghan government and Taliban parleys as early as 2001, and we all know what happened after that and what is likely to happen going forward. So Bolton is one of those people. Now Bolton in his book also takes a very dangerous stand against North Korea. It must be understood that North Korea and the US were on the cusp of a nuclear exchange in 2017. And credit must be given to President Trump for resorting to diplomacy and shaking hands with Kim Jong un and averting a debilitating and disastrous nuclear exchange or an exchange that could have led to a nuclear showdown. So, for Ambassador Bolton to advocate the use of force by one nuclear power against another nuclear power, albeit a smaller one, and also the one that has the capability to target US cities with nuclear weapons, is but a recipe for disaster. So, if you look at how Bolton was pressing and prodding President Trump to take a military route against North Korea with a view to with a view to disarming that country and denuclearizing that country. You will find that President Trump's intransigence on not following that route was perhaps very uh, promising because his not listening to his national security advisor on North Korea perhaps saved the region and the country, and of course the United States from from a big disaster. So we need to understand that um, the American foreign policy ecosystem has given place to people like this author, and these people have then gone on to affect US foreign policy in a very negative manner, which has had implications for and on how US has been perceived globally. So I suggest you all to read this book, not only for the reasons that I mentioned, but also for the fact that you'll understand and you'll get insights on how President Trump, who was a very different kind of a president in the US system, uh, faced many impediments in changing the course of US foreign policy. It must be stressed that US foreign and security policies have thrived on the use of force, um, on intimidating rivals, and on trying to impose upon other countries its version of a rules based system and a rules based governance model. So, as the US and China increase and ramp up their competition, it is critical for us to read books like this so that we understand that a dominant force and a dominant voice in US foreign policy ecosystem advocates for an approach that is likely to be very destabilizing. And such an approach could be very, I must say, disastrous for the region, for regions across the world. I'll end here, and I look forward to seeing you next time with another book. Thank you.